key insights on Atmanirbhar Bharat oftentimes come from the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. So thank you all very much for joining us. Supriya Shrinate, the BJP says, look at what our government has done 1 year before the elections and compare that to what the UPA did. Closer to the elections, UPA was spending money in the hope that money being given to voters would help the UPA come back to power. That didn't work. Sudhanshu ji's party is looking at the long game, trying to spend on public infrastructure in a bid to ensure that you build the assets that can build the new India, because as you well know, the highest multiplier for money spent is on infrastructure. So yours was short-sighted politics in the budget. Theirs is a longer game, which is laying the foundations of building a new India. Let's start from there.
We've seen the build-up of New India since 2014. It's been 9 years now. We are still waiting for those fruits to emerge for every section of this society. But before I go any further and answer questions on their frugal or not so frugal spending, let me ask two things to my esteemed co-panelist. Every budget text is presented in some context. This is one budget which is absolutely out of context. What are the 3 or 4 big things that Indian economy and we, the people at large, face today? Unemployment, price rise, income inequality, and lower wages. The budget doesn't seem to talk about any of that. The budget has not moved the needle on consumption. The budget has not moved the needle on jobs. The budget certainly has not moved the needle on poverty. And please explain to me, whatever they're spending may be frugal or prudent or imprudent otherwise, how is this government planning to lay the foundation of a new India while actually cutting the spending on education, on health, on agriculture, on rural and on urban development, and on flagship women's schemes, and on social empowerment? And I speak with numbers. I am also telling you that this budget had allocated, the budget this year had allocated a certain sum for all of these things, spent much less, and this year as a percentage of the GDP, those numbers have gone down further. I mean, what is this doublespeak all about?
Sudhanshu ji, John Drez has a piece out which says, adjusted for inflation, actual spends on key social sector schemes is actually down in comparison to 2013-2014, which were the last years of the Manmohan government. The charge against you is, while you're spending on public infrastructure, when it comes to the social sector, whether it is on Manrega, whether it is on some of the social sector schemes to do with education and health, the spends are flat or tending downwards, which if you adjust for inflation are actually much lower than earlier. Sonia Gandhi, in fact, the chairperson of the UPA, has written an editorial this morning where she's accusing your government of being anti-poor and pro the rich capitalists.
Since you have given the reference of the last budget of UPA government 2013-14, I would just like to put forth 2 facts. Number 1, they have given a loan waiver to the farmers in 2013, just in run-up to the 2014 election, 60,000 crore rupees, but they have not mentioned in their budget. They have shifted it to the next year. If somebody is having doubt, they can go through the speech of Sri Arun Jaitley ji in 2014 budget and you will get a clear thing. Another thing, that they have taken so many oil bonds which were not liable to be paid in that year. This liability will be in 2026. So just 2 points which can give you a fictitious good picture. Despite that, the rate of growth was lower than the rate of inflation at the time. Now coming to our side, right from 2014 onwards, if somebody is unable to see, we were the 10th largest economy, now we are the 5th largest economy. We have become the 3rd biggest producer of automobile. We have become the 2nd biggest producer of the mobile handset. Previously, we were the 2nd biggest consumer, but not the 2nd biggest producer. We are having the national highways developed at the pace of 38 kilometers per year. And for the first time, we are having a defense production. Prior to that, there was no production of the light machine guns. Now we have get an aircraft carrier ship. All those things have happened, but to visualize this, you should have a wise vision, which I think is lacking on the part of the Congress party.
Can I make a small intervention?
Very quickly, yes.
The smallest intervention that I would want to make on this is, do not compare 2013-14 budget. Compare last budget of this government, 2023 fiscal year versus 24 fiscal year. Spending on education was 2.64% of the GDP, down to 2.5. Spending on health was 2.2% of the GDP, down to 1.9. Spending on agriculture was 3.8% of the GDP, down to 3.2. Rural development, 5.8 to 5.29, and it's a similar picture for urban. My problem with the government and the defendants of this budget is, you should never talk about oil bonds, because all that you have paid is 3.5% of the 28 lakh crore that you fleeced from the people of this country. For the last 6 months, crude oil prices are down $36 a barrel. Have petrol and diesel prices gone down in this country? You have cut subsidy for fertilizer and for food and for agriculture. What are we even talking about? I mean, you really are talking about an India that doesn't seem to exist for the common man. Even your tax proposal is so anti-common man and so anti-saving that nobody has been put their right minds together and explain
Ashwini ji, respond to this. The critique is, if this was the UPA government doing some of these things, by now the Swadeshi Jagran Manch would have been out protesting. The fact that some of the government spending on key social sector schemes, including on Manrega, is actually coming down, that a lot of MSMEs in the MSMEs and those in the informal sector continue to be in distress, and that we're seeing wealth inequity rise post the pandemic, doesn't now seem to be bothering the Swadeshi Jagran Manch as much as it would have had another government been in power.
See, if you talk about Swadeshi Jagran Manch, it has always been critique to all sorts of governments, not just this government or the other government. Now the question here is about the budget. And budget obviously is the reflection of the government's policies. If you look at the budget this year or the previous 9 years of the budget, this government and our school of thought is our opinion is that it is never good to give doles, it's never good to just give freebies and say that yes, we have reduced the poverty by giving away the right to work, giving away this and that. We have to empower the people. We have to make them capable of earning enough so that they can spend on all these. But this is a mismatch, and this is a kind of difference of opinion between the UPA and NDA. And in the very beginning, Narendra Modi ji had said that Manrega is a symbol of the policies of the Congress government, where people were kept on suffering from the poverty, unemployment, and so on. We have to keep people capable enough. This was his opinion. So this is the different school of thoughts. You know, one school of thought, the other school of thought. They were of the opinion of which was given by the Amartya Kumar Sen, that we have to give this free. Now, on this count, yes, we are with the government on the issue that yes, they are providing houses to the poor people, those who don't have, or making them capable enough. But giving doles is no good. But at this juncture, if rural people are unemployed, we have to keep them going, and therefore Manrega is a necessary evil. But we have to come out of this Manrega and all sorts of doles and make the people capable enough.
Okay, so you're talking about wasteful spending or non-optimal funding, and the fact that every rupee spent on Manrega, Supriya, could potentially be spent better. You could get higher return on your spending if you were spending on public infrastructure, which is what the BJP is trying to do, unlike what you were trying to do, which is just to hand out cash in the hope that they'll vote you back to power.
So it's very rich for us sitting here at the Maurya Sheraton to say that what we do for the poor is doles and what we do for the rich is incentive. That's the classic problem that this government is obsessed with. I'd like to actually counter question you and ask, when corporate rates effectively come down by 5 percentage points, is that dole or incentive? When surcharge for the super rich in this country comes down significantly, is that dole or incentive? I mean, let's not get carried away. And if the Prime Minister hated Manrega so much, he
But
wouldn't
tax
have...
collections have gone up
No, one
since.
second.
Despite the pandemic, there is greater regularization in tax collections. Tax collections are showing more buoyancy. In fact, one of the reasons why the fiscal deficit is better than most people would have expected to, because tax collections have been more buoyant.
Fiscal deficit is at 8.8%, including the government's fiscal deficit and the PSUs. You're letting the PSUs do their own bidding. The fiscal deficit is as high as 8.8%. The government may not admit it in parliament. The government's record is showing a very different picture. I have a counter question to anything that is being said here on doles and rights. The reality is that you have to incentivize consumption. What has this government done to incentivize consumption? You're actually telling people in this country, you know, to answer the question on Manrega first, actually. The Prime Minister said Manrega is a monumental failure and how he's had to spend every year more on Manrega. In fact, the BJP governments are now talking about an urban Manrega of sorts, an urban
Sudhanshu ji, respond to this. If it's such a failure of the UPA,
You're having
you've
to
now
spend
been in
more.
power for 9 years. Ab tak to UPA failures ko aapko khatam kar dena
50,000
chahiye
crore
tha.
rupees was allocated for Manrega. You had to spend 90,000 crore. You've cut it down by 1/3 in this budget. What good?
Actually, there is a fundamental difference in the approach of ours and theirs. When
Yeah,
you
you
say
work for the
that
rich, we work
provide
for the
1
poor.
rupee in the hand of a person to spend it at his or her will. This is an empirical study that contributes to the 45 paisa to 90 paisa in the economy. But if you put it in the capital expenditure and creates an infrastructure, it provides 3.45 rupees in the long run. But look at our Supriya ji. She is saying that the PSU's deficit is that. I challenge her that post-liberalization, can you quote a single budget in which the PSU's deficit is included in the fiscal deficit? The answer is categorically no. But in order to create a situation and in order to evade what is the real thing, I want to say just one thing. We have given 81 lakh self-help groups to the women. 34 people are getting the Mudra loans. At the fundamental level, 80 crore people are getting food support, those who are the poorest of the poor. But on the upper side, if you say, first time we are manufacturing the BrahMos missile, exporting it. Now, Philippines has become the first country. Now the Airbus has joined and fighter aircraft is being manufactured here. I just want to ask one question. Our scientists and engineers were capable enough of making Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan, but they were not capable of making a fighter plane. Does this thing sound logical? We were capable of making intercontinental ballistic missile, but not the light machine guns. Does this thing sound logical? No. The previous government was not interested.
And you had wrong
Might
priorities.
be because business can carry on in some other way to make some people super rich.
Because people were benefiting in the UPA from weapon imports. I think Sudhanshu ji has managed to get a round of applause, which is interesting.
You can
Therefore,
coax one out of the audience if you say that one more time.
Was that?
You can coax an applause out of the
I
audience
didn't.
if you
This
say
was
that one
completely
more time.
unsolicited.
Anyways,
They're
go ahead.
welcome to clap or not clap whenever they want. Anyway, that you wanted to continue importing weapons from abroad because there were people in the UPA gravy train who were benefiting from it, whether it is the AK-203 project in Amethi or the BrahMos, which is being manufactured again in Uttar Pradesh and elsewhere. The BJP is trying to make India Atmanirbhar. From semiconductors, they are attempting to get them into India. Electronics manufacturing in the NCR region, defense manufacturing. It's all an attempt in the right direction. It will take time to show results, but they're pushing in the right direction.
What is Atmanirbhar? To my understanding, it translates into self-reliance. And any country can only be so self-reliant as far as people have jobs to do. The BJP's track record on jobs, I don't think I have to sit and eulogize it here or put out the numbers. Their track record on jobs is dismal. They've now been in government for 9 years. So to say what UPA did and what you did not do, let's not get carried away. Yes, the BJP has done something unprecedented. He speaks about missiles. You know, a day before the budget, the economic survey puts out numbers. Industrial production growth is down to 4.1% from 10.3%. What is their explanation? Why is that growth dipping? Why are those numbers dismal? Why is the job scenario so grim? The problem is that it's very good to sit here and make boisterous statements. Can you explain to me why is our trade deficit at China at an alarming $100 billion, unprecedented in India and China's bilateral trade? And let me tell you, no. Before you go any further, they'll say, we have become the largest or the second largest or the third largest, whatever he said, mobile manufacturers. Who's inflating that mobile bill? Who's inflating the trade deficit bill with China? The mobile making companies. What are we talking about? I mean, let's talk in the
Ashwini ji, is that
realm
not
of
something that
reality.
bothers you, that post Galwan the government said they would ban Chinese apps, that they would try and restrict trade with China? Instead, the deficit in India's trade with China has actually gone up much more than in the past, and that continues to happen. So isn't that something you should be critiquing? How does the Swadeshi Jagran Manch wrap its head around this?
See, we have always been telling the government that this deficit with China is getting more and more serious, and therefore we need to do something. Government did a right thing in 2018 to raise the tariffs on electronics and telecom, and that produced results. Everybody here would agree with me that after that only our mobile production has increased, and this has also led to increase in the exports of mobiles and other telecom products. But there is a confusion in the government, I must say, and we have always been saying so, and just one day before we had issued a statement that we should have raised tariffs. We should have raised tariffs during this, and we have to make strategic calculations that where the tariffs are to be increased. There is, Sudhanshu ji, I would like you to really pass it on to the Finance Minister. We have also been saying that there is one example. Our viscose, there are about 7-8 viscose factories, plants. 7 of them are not working, they are idle, for the simple reason that viscose is coming via Vietnam under ASEAN agreement, and it is coming at a lower tariff. We need to do something. We have to make strategic efforts. Yes, government will have to go and change the ASEAN agreement or whatever we have to do. But this is only an example. There are several other examples. That is the reason why our economic analysts keep on making holy cow out of this intermediates imports. Intermediates, we are having, as Sudhanshu ji was also saying, that we have a lot of capabilities. We could do everything. We could make Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, everything. But can't we make these intermediates? Yes, we can. I have given you one example. There can be several such examples. We have to make efforts to stop Chinese imports, and China has been deliberately doing it. During UPA government, there was 3,000% increase in the imports from China. That is also to be seen. And obviously, this continues. Then why? Why? Because we have not made sufficient efforts. But PLI scheme is good. All other efforts which are being made is good. When we are saying, yes, we have to impose technical barriers, that is also okay. But without tariffs, I don't think, as a student of economics, I don't think it should not be like Nehruvian tariffs of 400%, 700%, but it has to be raised from 5% to 10% or to 15%, wherever we can make our people competitive.
Okay.
So of late, Swadeshi Jagran Manch has stopped talking about the custom duties that are raising, because they now have held a brief for Mr. ADANI. And I want
what
to
do you
talk
say?
about
We have raised.
Very good,
No,
sir.
this is
Congratulations
not correct. This is not correct. One day before we had issued
Congratulations, sir, you were unheard.
no, it's
No
not
heed
that.
was
We have
paid to
always been
whatever
saying
you
so.
raised,
We
quite
have always
clearly.
been saying so. Please don't say.
No,
can I-
you could have raised whatever. Nobody paid heed to you. The finance minister went ahead and raised customs duties, so don't tom-tom what you raised. Let's address the elephant in the room. He spoke about incentivizing production, super rich and all of that. How is the Modi government incentivizing corporate India by letting one man build leading monopolies across ports, airports, food, agriculture, renewable energy, and look at what that contagion is doing to corporate markets. Look at what that contagion is doing to LIC, what that contagion is doing to SBI. And not a squeak from India's regulators. There are indices like Dow Jones and S&P that have put out scathing statements saying fraudulent and serious allegations. Look at the severity of their tone. There are institutions like Citigroup, Standard Chartered, Credit Suisse that have said we can no longer accept Adani Group's bonds as collaterals for any loans. But not a squeak from our regulators. And let me tell you, in my earlier capacity as a business news journalist, I can tell you there is SEBI, there is RBI, there is IRDA, which is the insurance regulator, there is DRAI, there is ED, there is SFIO, there is MCA. Multiple agencies and institutions actually should be looking into the mess on which the government has chosen to maintain a stoic silence, and people to my left and right hold a brief to defend them.
Now, this is where the opposition has its knives out for you, Sudhanshuji, saying that this is a government. Jairam Ramesh tweeted on behalf of the Congress to say, "Akhir Adani aapke hain kaun?" Now, is this turning out to be a big problem in Parliament and outside?
Taken the issue to China and the international aspect, so I would like to put forth certain facts. You have said that a knife out, it's knife out certain things to cut the growth story of India. I would like to give an example. iPhone factory shifted from China to India in Bengaluru. You remember 2 years back? Such a huge strike and violent strike in only iPhone factory. How come? And who is going to be benefited? I think anybody can understand if somebody is having doubt, he should or she should try to check their common sense.
No, so Mahesh Jethmalani ji said yesterday that he sees a Chinese hand in the attack on Adani by Hindenburg. Are you supporting that?
I am just saying that if Apple has started manufacturing 25% of the phones in India and a violent strike in which damage was done only in Apple factory, तो मुझे लगता है समझने वाले समझ रहे हैं, ना समझे वो अनाड़ी है.
So Rahul, you
I
are
do not
essentially
want,
suggesting here. Oh, I thought you were
after
done.
return. Now coming to the international aspect she has mentioned. Then I would like to say, I'm not quoting the government of India data. IMF saying that India's growth rate is going to be 6% next year. And what is going to be the global growth rate? 2.9. I would like to ask, name a single G7 country, single G20 country, which is going to have higher growth rate than India, or any country which is having lower inflation than India. And as far as the international agencies are concerned, I would remind just a couple of months back, these people you were chest thumping that in hunger index we have gone down, even gone down with Pakistan, in which क्या situation है, खाने का ठौर नहीं है, दंगे हो रहे हैं, गोलियां चल रही हैं और उनसे हम पीछे हैं. If these type of things happen overseas, and also I would like to say, since last 7 or 8 years, you go and check the timing of the things. Whenever there is a session of parliament is going to be there, from Rafale time to Pegasus time to this time, suddenly something erupts. And taking the clue of that, they always try to create a ho-halla, and finally nothing substantial come out of that, because I think they are trying to evade the real discussion, because discussing here on the on media platform is very easy. You say something and go out, but it's standing on the floor of the house, there is an issue that if you are saying anything incorrect, there is can be a matter of privilege. Like they are saying that per capita income is going down. Finance Minister in her speech has said that in the last 8 years, it has doubled. 1,97,000. They are not able to talk to that.
Do you
Can I make a small
just one
point
second,
on
Ashwini ji, do you see in the Hindenburg Adani report a Chinese conspiracy, an alleged attempt, a geopolitical war which seems to be at place, where China is trying to trip one industrial conglomerate because they seem to be adding to India's economic diplomacy capacity internationally?
We have to look at the Hindenburg attack on 5 points. One, whether Hindenburg had some conflict of interest, everybody will say yes. Second is whether Indian laws permit Hindenburg to do like this. The answer is no, because this has happened in the lower court. Tisajari court, Hindenburg was questioned, they didn't contest, and Google was asked to take down, Twitter was asked to take down their tweets. Then comes the third point, whether Hindenburg is allowed to publish reports in US about any US company. They are not allowed. But they are allowed to do anything with India and create this kind of atmosphere in India. Fourth, whether Adani is burning cash, like Nika was doing, like like other companies, Paytm and others, where 70% of the money was lost. The investors lost 70% of their money, but no questions were raised. Now I come to your point of Chinese hand. Whenever there is something, we would always be, try to see who is going to gain out of it. China is the biggest beneficiary because Adani is giving good run to China everywhere. In case of ports, in case of solar panel production, in case of semiconductors, in every field. Therefore, who is going to get benefited? It is China. Therefore, Chinese hand should also be investigated in this.
You're asking for an investigation into the Chinese hands because whether it's ports with Bangladesh, Israel, attempts in Sri Lanka and elsewhere, the Adani Group has been a force multiplier to the India story. Therefore, those linked to the current government say this is something that at least should be investigated, Supriya.
Can I make a small point? I must congratulate Mr. Mahajan for defending Adani better than they could have defended themselves. So big congratulations, sir. You really have put in a very brave defense, completely false and infructuous, and I'll tell you exactly why. Nobody is questioning Mr. Adani's dealings in ports or Haifa, Israel or Sri Lanka or any of that. What are we bothered about? 16 lakh crore worth of market cap has eroded in India's capital market since the 24th of January. 10 lakh crore of that money is Mr. Adani's companies and his counters and his shareholders. They're paying a price for that contagion and that carnage. Why should 6 lakh crore additional money be destroyed of those shareholders who have invested in 4,000 plus perfectly clean, good governed listed entities? Who's going to talk about the minority shareholders in this country? I want to understand. That is SEBI's job. Who is going to talk about the fact that 30 crore worth of LIC policyholders put their money, and some people who invest in LIC are not, blue-blooded people who are sitting here or the pink papers. People who invest in LIC are people with very, very meager income who believe that zindagi ke saath bhi or zindagi ke baad bhi. That money has been put in Adani, and what is LIC's defense? That our exposure is under control. We entered at 20, we are at 50 or whatever they say. They also went up to 76. There is something called time value of rupee. If I invest 100 rupees 10 years back and 5 years later it becomes 1,000, but again at the end of 10 years it becomes 200, my investment has not gone up from 100 to 200. My investment has come down from 1,000 to 200. That's how financial institutions the world over, mark-to-market CAGR is calculated. That's how it's reported. So let's not get carried away. What about India's banks? 38% of Mr. Adani's exposure is to banks in India on debt. 81,000 crore rupees. 8% of that is private. 30% of that is public money. 45 crore shareholders of SBI want to know how are they ring-fenced? Why is the government not acting on it?
Awkward that a body that's meant to handle people's life's earnings through pensions invests in a stock or a group of stocks where domestic mutual funds are not willing to put their money because it doesn't meet the investment mandate of domestic mutual funds, even if they're on the equity side and are meant to be more aggressive than a body like LIC, which is meant to be highly conservative because it is handling people's life savings.
Those who deal with the financial institutions and the share market and the financial instruments, they very well understand that in any time space of less than 1 week, drawing any conclusion is nothing but your prejudice. Our regulators are professionally competent enough to see the things, and Finance Minister has given a statement that any one company or institution cannot have any significant impact on the Indian financial system. But जैसे ही कुछ थोड़ा सा गड़बड़ हो जाए तो क्या लगता है, खुशी मिली इतनी जो दिल में ना समाए, पलक बंद कर लूं कहीं छलक ही ना जाए. मतलब in a span of less than 1 week, you are drawing so many conclusions from here
this
to
is
there.
an important point.
One sentence. One interesting fact I would like to put. You know, from where the word Hindenburg was attached previous to this. Hindenburg, first air crash in the history of the world, was a Hindenburg was a big balloon in 1937 who came from Germany to New York. When it was going to land in New Jersey, prior to landing, it crashed. And you know, another word associated with Hindenburg. Hindenburg, Paul Wall Hindenburg was the chancellor who appointed Adolf Hitler as the chancellor of Germany. So the history says that those who relied on the decisions of the Hindenburg are bound to give a big crash to their sentiments, or whatever the decisions prove to be wrong.
Supriya,
What has
one of the
essentially
Supriya,
crashed is the big hot air balloon that we built with Adani, thanks to your Prime Minister.
अरे
and
उसमें
it's
जो
come
बैठे थे
crashing
जल
down.
गए थे.
Supriya, one of the basic tenets of criminal jurisprudence is that you're innocent till proven guilty. The opposition in India, particularly the Congress, as Sudhanshu ji says, seems to be lapping this up with delight. You know, Gadkari ji was here on the stage this morning. He said that there are 25,000 crore rupees of projects which are with one particular group. And naturally, if those projects are halted, it slows down India's march. Therefore, let the investigators, the regulators do their job, but don't assume guilt just because it suits your political agenda.
You hit the nail on its head. Let the regulators and let the institutions do their job. Are the regulators and institutions being allowed to do their job? IRDA, the insurance regulator, has not even put out a single statement on LIC's exposure. What essentially are we talking about here? What are we saying? We are saying let investments continue, let the group continue to function, but at some stage the regulators and the institutions have to step up and protect minority shareholders. It's very good for him to say, एक हफ्ते में मत देखिए. एक हफ्ते में लोगों की जिंदगी भर की कमाई उड़ गई है मार्केट्स में.
No, but
6 लाख
LIC
करोड़.
put out a statement to say they invested because Adani stocks were AA grade. It fit their investment mandate. It's not as if they did something which was outside their mandate. When the price went up in the manner that it did, that investment manager would have been deemed to be a genius ki dekho uska jo investment tha, look at how it's done, which is what Sudhanshu ji is saying. It's come down now. At some point in time, it will correct. You can't cast judgment in just a matter of a week.
You have heard about the institution Elara Capital that invested in Adani's FPO that had to be called out. Joe Johnson, the brother of Boris Johnson, former UK's premier, whose son, of course, works for Adani Defence here in Ahmedabad. Joe Johnson had to quit. Heads are rolling in the UK, but not a squeak in India. What disparate comparisons are we even making? I'm sorry to say. LIC may put out a statement. LIC has to be questioned on why did they take this exposure? How did that 76,000 crore become 30,000 crore as of today?
But that's the way the markets function.
And what about ring fencing the small investors? What
Okay,
about ring
Sudhanshu
fencing
ji,
LIC's policy
all
holders?
these questions which are being asked,
And
the
a
opposition
small
says
point
the
that I want to
government
make.
must
Rahul, a very small
Yes.
point. The finance minister informed Lok Sabha in July of 2021, particularly Ms. Moitra of the TMC, that an investigation is being done into Adani stock manipulation and its overvaluation. It's been 18 months. Where is that report? And which is why we are questioning that institutions
The
and
opposition's
regulators are
concern
not being
is
allowed to function.
because of alleged political proximity between the industrial house and the government, investigators and regulators may go easy. There is apparently an ongoing DRI investigation on stock manipulation, which we haven't heard from.
I just like to put forth the political intent in the shown content.
All right, let's dive into. They're setting up. All right, let's dive into the taxes, the tax changes that were announced this time around. What were some of the hits, and also what were some of the misses? Vijay Jain, Senior Tax Advisor, Neeraj Ahuja, APAC Tax Head, Neeru Ahuja, APAC Tax Head, Deloitte, with us, and Sanjay Tolia, Partner, Price Waterhouse Co. Thank you so much all for joining us in conversation.